The first thing Rowan became aware of was the pounding in her head. It was a dull, rhythmic thud that seemed to echo behind her eyes. She kept them squeezed shut, hoping the familiar feel of her own soft cotton pillow would greet her. Instead, her cheek was pressed against something impossibly smooth and cool, like the silky sheets she'd once felt in a fancy department store but could never afford. A faint, clean scent filled the air, like pine trees after a rainstorm, and something else, something wild and earthy she couldn't name. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. Her memory of the night before was a blur of colorful lights, loud music, and clinking glasses. It was her 25th birthday. Her friends had taken her out to her favorite restaurant, and then, because turning 25 felt like a real grown-up milestone, they had gone to a new club. She remembered laughing, dancing, and drinking a special birthday cocktail that tasted like strawberries. After that, the details got fuzzy. There was a walk. Had she walked home? She didn't think so. She definitely would have remembered arriving in a place that smelled this expensive. Cautiously, she forced one eye open, then the other. The light in the room was soft and gray, filtering through a large window covered by a thin, gauzy curtain. She wasn't in her small, cozy apartment with its slightly lumpy bed and posters on the walls. She was lying in the center of a massive bed, so big she could have stretched her arms out in every direction and not touched the edges. The headboard was made of dark, polished wood, carved with intricate patterns of twisting vines and howling wolves. Wolves? That was an unusual decoration choice, she thought. She slowly pushed herself up, the silky comforter pooling around her waist. The room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls the color of a stormy sky. A large fireplace made of gray stone took up one whole wall, and on the floor lay a fluffy rug that looked like the fur of some enormous animal. Everything was tidy and clean, but it had a masculine feel to it, strong and simple. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Where in the world was she? Had one of her friends put her up in a hotel as a birthday surprise? That seemed too generous. And hotels didn't usually have carvings of wolves on the furniture. Just as she was about to swing her legs out of the bed, a sound made her freeze. It was the distinct, heavy sound of a door opening and closing somewhere nearby. Footsteps, firm and confident, echoed on a hardwood floor, growing louder. They were coming down the hall, towards this room. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through her. She looked around wildly for a place to hide, but it was too late. The bedroom door opened. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, with broad shoulders that almost filled the frame. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and dark pants, but even in casual clothes he looked powerful, like someone who was used to being in charge. His hair was dark brown and his jaw was strong and set. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his expression one of pure shock, as if he had found a rare bird nesting in his bed. His eyes, a striking shade of hazel, widened slightly. Rowan's mouth felt dry. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, pulling the comforter up to her chin like a shield. "Where am I?" The man took a step into the room, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I was about to ask you the same question," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble. It was a nice voice, she thought irrationally, which made the whole situation even more confusing. He didn't seem angry, just deeply puzzled. "This is my bedroom. How did you get in here?" "Your bedroom?" Rowan's voice squeaked. I don't know. I was celebrating my birthday last night and then I woke up here. I swear, I don't know how I got here." She felt tears of fear and frustration prick at her eyes. This was a nightmare. The man took another step closer, moving slowly as if trying not to scare a frightened animal. He studied her face, his head tilted. "You seem to be thinking very hard." "Your birthday?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. Then something strange happened. His eyes, which had been a warm hazel, seemed to glow from within. A ring of bright, molten gold appeared around the edges of his irises, growing brighter until his entire eyes shone like two golden coins. Rowan gasped and shrank back against the headboard. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. Before she could scream, the man's lips parted, but the sound that came out wasn't entirely his own. It was deeper, rougher, a growl that seemed to vibrate right through the floor and into her bones. A single word, filled with a possessive and undeniable certainty. "Mate." The word hung in the air between them. Rowan stared, her mind refusing to make sense of what was happening. The golden glow in his eyes faded back to hazel, but the intensity of his gaze remained. He looked just as stunned as she felt, maybe even more so. What was that?" Rowan stammered, her whole body trembling. "What did you just say? What are you?" The man, whose name she still didn't know, let out a long, slow breath. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that seemed to mix frustration and awe. He looked from her to the door and then back at her as if making a very big decision. "My name is Landon," he said, his voice returning to that calm low rumble, though it now held a new weight. "And this is going to be very difficult for you to believe. You are in my house, in a place deep in the forest that is hidden from most of the world. It's called a pack territory." Rowan just shook her head, unable to speak. "Pack territory?" That sounded like something from an animal documentary. Landon continued, his eyes locked on hers. "And I am what you would call a werewolf. The leader of my pack, the alpha. And what you just heard, that was my wolf. Recognized you. When a wolf finds its perfect other half, the person it is destined to be with forever, it calls that person its mate." He paused, letting the unbelievable words sink into the quiet, luxurious room. The early morning sun had grown a little stronger, casting long shadows from the carved wolves on the headboard. They seemed to be watching her. "My wolf," Landon said, his voice barely above a whisper, but every word clear and sharp as ice, "is calling you mine." The word mate seemed to echo in the vast, silent room long after Landon had stopped speaking. Rowan could only stare at him, her mind a frantic, scrambling mess trying to find a logical foothold in a reality that had just crumbled away. Werewolf. Alpha. Pack territory. Mate. Each word was more insane than the last. This had to be a dream, a very detailed, very unsettling dream brought on by too many birthday cocktails. But the throbbing in her head was real. The silky, cool sheets under her trembling hands were real. The imposing, confused man standing at the foot of the bed was undeniably, solidly real. A harsh, shaky laugh escaped her lips. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling as much as her hands. "Okay, very funny. Is this some kind of prank? Did my friend Chloe set this up? Is there a hidden camera?" She looked around the room, searching for a glint of a lens in the carved wood of the headboard or the stone of the fireplace. "Because it's not funny anymore. I want to go home. Right now." Landon's expression didn't change. There was no smirk, no indication that he was about to yell, "Surprise." He simply looked at her with a patience that felt heavy and ancient. "I wish it were a prank, Rowan. That would be simpler for both of us. But it's not. There are no cameras. This is my life. And it seems, for reasons I don't yet understand, you have just become a very important part of it." He took a careful step closer and she flinched back instinctively. He stopped immediately, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you. I give you my word. But you're deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. You can't just walk out of here. And even if you could, it wouldn't be safe." "Not safe? What does that mean?" The question was out before she could stop it, a thread of genuine fear weaving through her anger. "It means the forest is my home, but it's also home to other things. Other packs who wouldn't look kindly on a human wandering alone through territories they consider theirs." He sighed, a sound of genuine weariness. "Look, I know this is a lot. Probably the most anyone has ever had to deal with before their first cup of coffee. How about this? You come downstairs with me. We'll have some breakfast. I'll answer every question you have as truthfully as I can. And after that, if you still want to leave, I will personally arrange a safe way for you to get home. No tricks. No lies." Rowan studied his face. His eyes, now back to their normal hazel, held a direct and steady gaze. He seemed sincere. But more than that, he seemed just as thrown by this situation as she was. He wasn't a kidnapper gloating over his prize. He was a man who had woken up to a monumental problem sitting in his bed. The primal, animal-like growl that had called her mate still terrified her, but the man in front of her, Landon, was trying to be reasonable. Her stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, a starkly human sound in the tense silence. She was hungry, and the promise of coffee was a powerful lure. "Okay," she said finally, her voice small. "Okay, breakfast, and answers. And then you take me home." A look of something, relief? Disappointment? Flickered in his eyes, but it was gone so fast she thought she might have imagined it. He simply nodded. "Agreed. There's a bathroom through that door if you'd like to freshen up. I'll be right outside." He turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. The moment he was gone, Rowan scrambled out of the enormous bed. Her legs felt like jelly. She hurried to the bathroom he had indicated, locking the door behind her. The bathroom was as impressive as the bedroom, with a large shower and fixtures that gleamed. She splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked pale, her eyes wide with shock. A human. In a werewolf's house. Called his mate. It was impossible. Yet here she was. When she emerged, feeling slightly more composed, Landon was waiting in the hallway. He led her down a wide staircase made of the same dark wood, into an open living area. The house was beautiful, built from logs and stone, with large windows that looked out onto a dense, green forest. It felt strong and permanent, a part of the land itself. It was nothing like her apartment in the city. He led her into a large, modern kitchen and gestured for her to sit at a wooden island. He moved around with a quiet efficiency, brewing coffee and pulling eggs and bread from the refrigerator. The normalcy of the actions was surreal. A werewolf was making her breakfast. The rich aroma of coffee began to fill the air, and Landon placed a steaming mug in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it, the heat a comforting anchor. She took a sip, the bitter liquid helping to clear the last of the fog from her mind. "Start from the beginning," she said, her voice firmer now. "What is a pack?" Landon leaned against the counter opposite her, his own mug in hand. "A pack is a family. A large family bound together by blood and loyalty. We live together, protect each other. This territory is our home, our safe place. We've lived here for generations, hidden from the human world. And you're the alpha. The leader." "Yes. The alpha is responsible for the safety and well-being of every single person in the pack. I make the decisions. I settle disputes. I lead the hunts and defend our borders. It's a big job." He said it not with arrogance, but with the weight of someone who felt the responsibility deeply. "And the wolf part?" she asked, the question feeling silly even as she asked it. "It's a part of me. Another side of who I am. I can shift into a wolf, but the wolf is always there, just under the surface. It gives me strength, speed, heightened senses. It also has instincts, strong ones. The strongest of all is the need to find a mate." Rowan looked down into her coffee mug. "A mate? You make it sound like forever." "For us, it is," he said, his voice soft but absolute. "It's not a choice like human dating. It's a recognition, a bond. When a wolf finds its mate, it's a connection that goes deeper than anything else. It's for life." "But I'm not a werewolf," Rowan insisted, looking up at him. "I'm just me, Rowan. I work in a bookstore. I pay bills. I call my mom on Sundays. How can I be a mate to a wolf?" Before Landon could answer, a new voice, bright and cheerful, cut through the kitchen. "Well, aren't you a lovely surprise?" A young woman with the same dark hair and hazel eyes as Landon bounded into the room. She was smiling widely, her gaze instantly locking onto Rowan with open, curious delight. She completely ignored Landon and came straight to the island. "I'm Sasha," she said, her energy filling the space. "The much more fun sibling. You must be the one causing all the commotion." "I heard the news." Landon sighed. "Sasha, maybe give us a minute?" "Nonsense," Sasha said, waving a hand at him but keeping her eyes on Rowan. "She looks like she could use a friendly face. And you, brother, can look a little intimidating before noon." She turned her full attention back to Rowan. "So, the mate thing. Wild, right? Don't worry, it's a lot for anyone to process. Even for us." Rowan found herself disarmed by Sasha's directness. You know about that?" "Everyone will know by now," Sasha said with a laugh. "News travels fast in a pack. But listen, it's actually a really amazing thing. It's like, imagine you've been listening to a song with one earphone in your whole life. It sounds okay, but it's a little quiet, a little off. Then you meet your mate and someone plugs in the other earphone. Suddenly you can hear the whole song, all the parts you were missing. It all makes sense. The bond makes you feel complete. And it happens fast. The feelings, the connection, it's intense from the very start." Sasha's explanation was so much more vivid and emotional than Landon's factual description. It didn't make the situation less strange, but it painted it in a different light. It wasn't just a cold, biological imperative, it was about connection, about belonging. Landon watched the exchange silently, his expression unreadable. After a moment he spoke. "Sasha is right. The bond creates powerful emotions very quickly. For me. For my wolf. I understand that for you it's different. You don't feel that pull. Not yet, anyway." Rowan fell silent, absorbing everything. A hidden family in the woods. A man who was also a wolf. A bond that was supposed to be forever. It was a fairy tale, but it felt terrifyingly real. She looked from Landon's serious, handsome face to Sasha's encouraging smile. She thought about her small, predictable life. Her empty apartment. The lonely birthday she had been trying to forget with a night out. Landon saw her hesitation. "I meant what I said," he told her, his voice gentle. "You can leave. But I'm asking you to consider staying. Just for today. Let me show you a little of our world. Let me Let me try to show you that this doesn't have to be scary. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But underneath it, something else was stirring. A flicker of curiosity. A strange, unexplainable sense of interest. The way Landon looked at her wasn't with possession, but with a kind of hopeful wonder. He wasn't demanding, he was asking. She took a deep breath, the scent of coffee and pine filling her lungs. Her safe, normal life was waiting for her back in the city. But when had her life ever been an adventure? One day, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'll stay for one day. The decision to stay, even for just a day, hung in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Rowan half expected Landon to press his advantage, to immediately start listing all the reasons this was her destiny. But he didn't. He simply nodded, a look of profound respect in his hazel eyes, and finished making breakfast. The meal was a quiet affair, the clinking of forks against plates the only sound competing with the chorus of birds outside the large kitchen windows. Sasha, after chattering happily for a few more minutes, had excused herself with a knowing wink, leaving Rowan alone with Landon and the enormous weight of her new reality. After they had eaten, Landon cleared the plates. If you're going to understand anything about this life, he said, his tone practical, you need to see it. Not just this house. The territory. The forest. And the other part of me. A fresh wave of anxiety washed over Rowan. You mean, the wolf? The memory of those glowing golden eyes and the guttural growl was still vivid. Yes, he said calmly. But not up close. Not unless you want to. From a distance. It's important that you see that it's not a monster. It's just me. In a different form. The idea was terrifying. Yet, the logical part of her mind, the part that had spent her life reading books and seeking knowledge, agreed. If she was going to make any sense of this, she had to face it head-on. Hiding in the kitchen wouldn't answer her questions. She gave a tight, nervous nod. Landon led her out through a back door onto a wide deck that overlooked the sprawling forest. The air was cool and clean, filled with the rich sense of damp earth and growing things. He pointed towards a narrow, well-worn path that disappeared into the thick trees. We'll follow that path. It leads to a clearing about a 10-minute walk from here. You wait at the edge of the trees. I'll go into the center of the clearing. You'll be safe. They walked in silence, the thick layer of pine needles on the path muffling their footsteps. Rowan's senses were on high alert. Every rustle in the undergrowth made her jump, every bird call sounded like a warning. Landon walked beside her, a steady, silent presence. He seemed completely at ease, his movements fluid and sure. He belonged here in a way she had never belonged anywhere. Soon they reached the edge of a sun-dappled clearing. It was a beautiful, peaceful spot, a circle of soft grass surrounded by tall trees. Landon stopped and turned to her. Wait here. I'll be right back. His gaze was intense, reassuring. Remember, you're safe. He walked into the center of the clearing, putting a good 50 feet between them. He turned to face her and for a long moment he just stood there. Then he began to remove his shirt. Rowan felt a blush creep up her neck, but the action wasn't sensual, it was practical, like an athlete preparing for an event. He folded the shirt neatly and placed it on the ground. What happened next was so fast that her mind could barely process it. It wasn't a slow, bone-cracking transformation from the movies. It was a blur of motion, a shift in the air itself. 1 second Landon was standing there, a tall, muscular man. The next, where he had stood, was a wolf. A massive, magnificent wolf. Its fur was a deep, shadowy black, so dark it seemed to absorb the sunlight. It was powerfully built, with a broad chest and strong legs. It was easily the size of a large bear, but moved with a lethal grace that was purely canine. The wolf shook its great head, and then it turned its gaze towards her. Its eyes were the same bright, intelligent gold that had glowed in Landon's eyes hours before. Her breath caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide from this apex predator. But she forced herself to stand still, to look back into those golden eyes. And she saw Landon. It was an impossible feeling, but it was undeniable. The way the wolf held its head, the calm, assessing intelligence in its gaze, it was the same as the man who had made her coffee. The wolf took a few steps towards her, not in a threatening charge but a slow, curious walk. It stopped about 20 feet away and simply sat down on its haunches, its tail giving a single slow wag against the grass. It was a gesture of peace. Of waiting. Tentatively, Rowan took a small step forward. Then another. The wolf didn't move, just watched her with that calm, golden gaze. She could see the texture of its fur, the power in its shoulders. It was awe-inspiring, but the sharp edge of her fear began to soften, replaced by a dawning sense of wonder. This wasn't a beast. This was Landon. This was the other half of the equation, the part she had only heard in a growl. Seeing it in the flesh made it real in a way words never could. After a few minutes, the wolf rose and trotted back to the center of the clearing. The same blur of motion happened, and Landon was standing there again, pulling his gray t-shirt back over his head as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He walked back to her, his expression carefully neutral, giving her space to process. "He's beautiful," Rowan whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. It was the only word that fit. A genuine, relieved smile touched Landon's lips for the first time. "Thank you." He gestured back towards the path. "Would you like to walk a little more? We can talk." They walked for what felt like hours, following winding trails that only he seemed to know. The conversation flowed more easily now. The initial terror had been replaced by a torrent of curiosity. She asked him about growing up in the pack, about what it was like to shift for the first time, about the responsibilities of being alpha. He answered everything patiently, his voice a low, steady rumble that blended with the sounds of the forest. In return, she found herself talking about her own life. She told him about her job at the bookstore, about her love for stories, about how she sometimes felt a little lonely in the big city, surrounded by people but never truly connecting with them. She talked about her family who lived far away, and how her 25th birthday had felt like a crossroads, a point where she wondered if her life was ever going to change. "It's funny," she said, looking down at the path. "I wished for an adventure. I just didn't expect it to be quite so furry." Landon chuckled, a warm, rich sound that seemed to startle a nearby squirrel. "Be careful what you wish for." As they walked, he pointed out things she would have never noticed. A den where a fox family lived, the specific call of a hawk that meant it had spotted prey, the subtle scent markers that defined the pack's border. He was showing her his world, and with every step she felt the strangeness of it all begin to fade, replaced by a growing fascination. He was so attuned to this place, so connected to every living thing in it. It was a depth of belonging she had never known. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long golden rays through the canopy of leaves, when they reached a small, bubbling creek. They sat on a large, flat rock at the water's edge, the sound of the water a soothing melody. "It's a lot to take in, I know," Landon said softly, looking at the flowing water. "A different world." "It is," Rowan agreed. "But it's also honest. Everything here is what it is. There's no pretending." She paused, gathering her courage. "Marcus, you're beta? He doesn't like that I'm here, does he?" Landon looked at her, surprised by her perception. "Marcus is cautious. He's loyal to the pack and his first duty is to protect it. Having a human as an alpha's mate is unprecedented. He worries it could be seen as a weakness by others." "Others?" "Other alphas. Other packs. Not all are as peaceful as we try to be. The Crimson Shadow Pack to the north, for example. Their alpha, Killian, is always looking for an advantage." He said the name with a distinct edge of dislike. "But you don't need to worry about that. My job is to protect what's mine. All of it." The way he said, "what's mine," wasn't possessive in a scary way. It was protective. It was a promise. In the quiet of the forest, with the setting sun painting everything in hues of orange and purple, Rowan felt the first real, undeniable pull. It wasn't the magical bond Sasha had described, not yet. It was simpler than that. It was a pull towards Landon himself. His strength, his patience, his quiet dignity. The man who was also a wolf. The alpha who was trying so hard to be gentle with her. She looked at his profile silhouetted against the golden light, and for the first time, the idea of going back to her old life didn't feel like a relief. It felt like a loss. The day was almost over, and the choice she had to make now felt infinitely more complicated than it had that morning. The peace of the forest, the gentle murmur of the creek, the warmth of the setting sun on her skin, it all formed a perfect tranquil bubble around Rowan and Landon. For a few precious moments, the impossible reality of werewolves and mate bonds felt distant, replaced by the simple, budding connection between a man and a woman. Landon's confession about the rival pack and Marcus's concerns had been a splash of cold water, but sitting beside him on the rock, the fear felt theoretical, a story about a storm on a far-off horizon while the sun still shone on them. That fragile peace shattered in an instant. It started with Landon. His entire body went rigid. His head snapped up, his gaze sharpening and focusing on a point deep within the trees across the creek. The relaxed man of a moment before was gone, replaced by the alpha. His nostrils flared and a low, warning growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that was entirely animal. "Rowan," he said, his voice a tight, controlled whisper. Get behind me. Now. Before she could even process the command, a figure emerged from the shadows of the pines. It was a man, but he moved with a predator's gait, sleek and confident. He was tall and lean, with reddish hair and eyes that held a cruel, calculating light. He didn't cross the creek, simply stood on the opposite bank, a smirk playing on his lips. His scent, sharp and aggressive like copper and smoke, carried across the water to them. Well, Landon, the man said, his voice a taunting drawl. I heard a rumor that the great alpha of the Midnight Fong had found himself a pet. I almost didn't believe it. Landon was on his feet in a fluid motion, placing his body squarely between Rowan and the intruder. He seemed to grow taller, his presence expanding to fill the clearing with palpable authority. Killian, Landon snarled, the name itself a curse. You are on my territory. This is a violation of our treaty. Killian, the alpha of the Crimson Shadow Pack, waved a dismissive hand. A minor trespass. I was just so curious. I had to see for myself if the mighty Landon had truly grown so soft as to tie himself to a human. His cold eyes slid past Landon, raking over Rowan with an invasive, dismissive stare. She doesn't look like much. Fragile. Easy to break. A fury unlike anything Rowan had ever known ignited within her. It wasn't just fear, it was a deep, primal outrage at being spoken about as if she were an object. But before she could even form a retort, Landon reacted. The change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. The controlled alpha vanished, replaced by pure, unleashed power. A roar erupted from him that was neither fully human nor fully wolf. It was the sound of absolute, unyielding dominance. The very air seemed to vibrate with its force. You will not look at her, Landon thundered, his voice dropping to a gravelly pitch that promised violence. You will not speak of her. She is under my protection. She is mine. The emphasis on the word mine was not a claim of ownership, but a declaration of a fundamental law. It was a line drawn in the sand, a warning that crossing it would mean utter annihilation. Killian's smirk faltered for a second, his confidence shaken by the raw power radiating from Landon. He had expected to find a weakened alpha, embarrassed by his choice. Instead, he found a force of nature more dangerous and focused than ever before. Touch her, Landon continued, taking a step forward, his golden eyes blazing. Breathe in her direction, and I will tear your pack apart, piece by piece, until the only thing left of the Crimson Shadow is a bad memory. Do you understand me? For a long, tense moment, the two alphas stared each other down across the water. The forest was silent, every creature holding its breath. Finally, Killian took a slight step back, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He had come to provoke, but he had miscalculated the depth of Landon's commitment. This isn't over, Landon, Killian spat, but the threat was weak, hollow. A human mate is a liability. Your enemies will see it. They will come for her. Let them try, Landon said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. With a final hateful glance, Killian melted back into the shadows of the trees, his scent fading away as quickly as it had come. The moment he was gone, the fierce energy seemed to drain from Landon. His shoulders slumped slightly and he turned to face Rowan. The golden fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a storm of worry and apology. Rowan, are you all right? I'm so sorry you had to see that. I'm so sorry he spoke to you that way. Rowan realized she was trembling, but not entirely from fear. She was shaking with the adrenaline of the confrontation, with the shock of seeing Landon's true power unleashed. He had been terrifying. He had been magnificent. And every ounce of that fearsome power had been directed at protecting her. I'm okay, she managed, her voice shaky. He was trying to scare you, wasn't he? By threatening me. Landon nodded, his jaw tight. Yes. He thought my connection to you would be a weakness. He was wrong. He took a step closer, his gaze intense. Seeing him near you, hearing his words, it didn't make me weak, Rowan. It made me stronger than I've ever been. It made me certain. They walked back to the house in a silence that was heavy with unspoken words. The event had changed everything. The theoretical danger was now real. Killian's vile words echoed in her mind, but they were drowned out by the memory of Landon's roar, a sound that had shaken the forest to its roots for her. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Landon led her out onto the deck under a sky brilliant with stars. The pack compound was quiet, lights twinkling in other houses scattered among the trees. Rowan, he began, his voice quiet but firm. I meant what I said this morning. If you want to go home, I will take you. Now, more than ever, I understand if you want to leave. This world, it can be brutal. It's not the safe, simple life you know. He was giving her an out. He was putting her safety above his own desperate desire, above the call of his wolf. That single act of selflessness meant more to her than any grand declaration ever could. She looked up at him, the starlight reflecting in his eyes. "What if I don't want simple?" she whispered. "What if I spent my whole birthday wishing for something to change, for my life to really begin?" Hope, bright and fierce, flared in his gaze. "What are you saying?" She took a deep breath, her decision crystallizing in the clear night air. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a feeling of rightness, a pull she could no longer deny. "I'm saying I want to stay. I want to try. With you. With the pack." The relief that washed over Landon's face was profound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it he withdrew a necklace. The pendant was a beautifully crafted howling wolf, carved from a dark, polished wood and hanging from a simple leather cord. "This isn't a collar or a chain," he said softly, holding it out to her. "It's a promise. A symbol of my vow to protect you, to honor you, and to stand by you. It's a welcome to the pack. It shows everyone that you are under my protection, and more importantly, that you are my chosen partner." Tears welled in Rowan's eyes, but they were tears of happiness, of finding a place where she truly belonged. She turned around and lifted her hair. Landon gently fastened the necklace around her throat. The wooden pendant felt warm and light against her skin. It didn't feel like a weight, it felt like a key. As his fingers brushed against the nape of her neck, a jolt, warm and electric, passed between them. It was the first real physical spark of the bond, a connection that went deeper than words. When she turned back to face him, she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes. Hope, wonder, and the beginning of a love that had been written in the stars and whispered by a wolf on her 25th birthday. The choice was made. Her adventure was just beginning. The weight of the wooden wolf pendant against Rowan's skin was more than just the feel of carved wood and a leather cord. It was an anchor, a tangible promise that settled the last of the trembling fear in her heart. As she stood with Landon under the vast, star-dusted sky, the silence between them was no longer filled with uncertainty, but with a profound, shared understanding. The decision was made. She was staying. This wild, hidden world was now her home. The next few days were a whirlwind of new experiences, a gentle immersion into the rhythm of pack life. Landon was true to his word, never pushing, always guiding. He gave her space to breathe, to process, but was always nearby, a steady, reassuring presence. Sasha became her cheerful shadow, a whirlwind of excitement as she took on the role of Rowan's official guide to the pack territory. She showed Rowan the community gardens, the workshop where craftspeople made everything from furniture to clothing, and the large, open-sided pavilion where the pack gathered for meals and meetings. The pack members themselves were cautiously curious. At first, Rowan felt their eyes on her, sensed the whispers that trailed in her wake. They were not hostile but watchful, assessing the human their alpha had chosen. But Landon's protection was absolute. The simple sight of the wolf pendant around her neck acted as a silent, powerful command. And slowly, as they saw her genuine interest, her respectful demeanor, and the undeniable way their alpha's stern expression softened whenever she was near, their caution began to melt into acceptance. She received shy smiles from the children, respectful nods from the elders, and eventually tentative greetings from the warriors who had once viewed her only as a vulnerability. A week after her decision, Landon told her the pack was holding a gathering for her. It wasn't a formal mating ceremony, he explained, that would come later, if and when she was truly ready, but a welcome. A celebration of the new bond and her official introduction as his chosen mate. As evening fell, the central fire pit in the heart of the compound was lit, its flames leaping towards the darkening sky. The scent of roasting meat and baking bread filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and quiet conversation. Rowan stood at the edge of the firelight, wearing a simple, comfortable dress that Sasha had lent her, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Landon found her there, emerging from the shadows to stand beside her. He was dressed in dark, simple clothes that emphasized his powerful frame, but his expression was soft as he looked down at her. "Ready?" he asked, offering her his arm. She took it, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength beneath her fingers. "Ready." Together they walked into the circle of firelight. The conversations hushed as every face turned towards them. For a moment, Rowan felt a surge of panic under the weight of so many gazes. But then Landon's hand covered hers, his thumb stroking a gentle, reassuring pattern on her skin. The gesture was small, but it filled her with courage. He led her to the center of the gathering, near the roaring fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the faces of the pack, young and old, all watching them with a respectful silence. "Pack of the Midnight Fong," Landon's voice rang out, clear and strong, carrying easily over the crackle of the fire. It was his alpha voice, but tonight it was filled with a warmth she had never heard in it before. "For generations we have lived by the laws of the moon and the bond of the wolf. We have trusted in the instinct that guides us to our destiny, to the one who makes us whole." He turned to look at Rowan, and the firelight caught the gold in his hazel eyes. "That instinct has led me to Rowan. She is human. She did not grow up knowing our ways. But she has shown more courage and more heart in these past days than many I have known my entire life. She has chosen to step into our world, to learn our ways and to stand by my side." He paused, his gaze sweeping over his people. "She is my mate. And tonight I present her to you not as an outsider, but as the future of this pack. She is under my protection, but more than that, she has my loyalty, my respect, and my heart. I ask you to welcome her as your own." A deep, resonant sound started then, not from Landon but from Marcus, the beta, who stood at the front of the crowd. It was a low, respectful hum that grew in volume as every single member of the pack, from the deepest-voiced elders to the youngest children, joined in. It was a welcoming chant, a vibration of acceptance that flowed through the air and settled in Rowan's bones. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she looked out at the community that was now hers. The fear was gone, completely replaced by a sense of belonging so powerful it stole her breath. This was her family. This was her home. Later, as the celebration continued with music and storytelling, Landon led her away from the fire, up a small hill that overlooked the entire territory. The sounds of the party were a happy murmur below them, and above, the full moon shone brightly, bathing the world in silver light. "It's beautiful," Rowan whispered, leaning into his side. His arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. The warmth of his body was a comfort against the cool night air. "It is," Landon agreed, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. "It's all beautiful now because you're here to see it." He leaned down and his lips met hers in their first real kiss. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of a slow, deep, and profound connection. It was a seal on their promise, a silent language that spoke of belonging, of devotion, of a future written in the stars. In that kiss, Rowan felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. The strange pull she had felt since waking up in his bed finally made perfect sense. This was where she was always meant to be. When they parted, Landon tilted his head back towards the moon, took a deep breath, and let out a long, melodic howl. It was a sound of pure joy, of claiming, of love. It echoed through the valley, a song for his mate. And from below, around the fire, the entire pack lifted their voices in answer. A chorus of howls that sang a welcome to Rowan, a celebration of their alpha's happiness, and a promise of a new beginning for them all. Rowan listened, her head resting against Landon's chest, feeling the rumble of his contented sigh. Her old life, the bookstore, the city, her lonely apartment, it all felt like a dream from long ago. This, here, with the man who was her wolf and the family that was now her pack, was her reality. Her birthday wish for an adventure had been granted in ways she never could have imagined. And it was only just the beginning. The story of Rowan and Landon is far from over. Their bond has been forged, but a new world brings new challenges. How will Rowan adapt to the ways of the pack? What secrets does her own past hold? And with a rival alpha like Killian watching from the shadows, what dangers will they face together? If you want to follow their journey, to see their love grow stronger with every trial, and to discover the secrets of the Midnight Fong pack, make sure to subscribe. Their story is just beginning and you won't want to miss what happens next.